Hey everybody, I wanted to do a video on this for quite a while, and I thought maybe it's time to start doing it. Get off my butt, stop being lazy. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but this is a video where I talked about the New Earth religion, New Earth movement, New Age, whatever you call it. And I said I would start proving what these people are all about, what their belief is, what system they're trying to front. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to show the interview of Margaret Sanger back in 1957 that pretty much gives you the opening door of all of what's going on today with all these, New Agers or whatever you call them, and what their belief is and what they're trying to establish in our world today. So that's coming.
And now we interrupt, disrupt, and crash this station.
The man fighting for peace, his legacy, truth in a sea of stupid.
Filtered for your sarcastic enjoyment, Go Scatter.
Recently, I heard that, and I don't know, sometimes I don't believe things that are on the internet because they're just chatter. But this is the kind of thing that's been going on for years, and they've talked about it over the decades. So it is not a surprise of mine that this is going to happen. Now, next year, I really couldn't tell you if that's going to happen or not. But the chatter is that people such as Bill Gates and the like are planning on establishing these new world system of government, what some people call a new world order, whatever it is. But it's a new system of government, and one of those rules, one of those things that they say that they plan on doing is lowering the population by a certain percentage because, and I really don't want to get into the details on how they're planning on doing that. Maybe disease, maybe just flat out, I don't know, being heinous and horrible about it. Who knows? But the chatter was that this is going to happen next year, him and his cronies. But it's supposed to be the, what do you call it, United Nations, or whatever they established, this new system of government, one military, one mark, one financial institution, so on and so forth. And they're saying it's supposed to happen next year, which I said he was a part of it. But he's not the only one. It's a bunch of other people. But they're just chatter about this. Well, and no one really knows if that's going to be next year or whatever. But this is what they've been talking about for decades. Now, here's the proof that I'm going to give you that tells you what their thought process is, what their thinking is. Now, they are a part of a new age movement. I've already shown you, I've already talked about in past videos and radio shows and whatnot over and over again. So the people that come in here and say, prove it, you can look at my other past shows and YouTube videos and things like that where I've done this time and time again. But this is mainly an interview of Margaret Sanger. Now, there are tons of people that follow this woman heel to toe, head to toe, whatever you call it. But there are, from anywhere from Hillary Clinton, there are actresses, celebrities, actors, musicians, the like, so on and so forth, business people, and it goes down the pike for, I don't know, decades. So these people have been talking about it, hinting about it, rubbing shoulders about, hey, for years. But now they're at the point where they're just not hiding it anymore, and they're flat out telling people what's going to happen. So here is two pieces of audio interviews that I'm going to show you before I show Margaret Sanger's interview and what she's talking about. And you can flat out tell this woman's more racist than racist can get. in this interview. It's from ABC in 1957. But here's a few interviews where these people have said what they truly believe in and who they're truly following.
And there's a whole generation, I say this, I said this, for apartheid South Africa. I said this for my own, community in the South. There are still generations of people, older people, who were born and bred and marinated in it, in that prejudice and racism, and they just have to die.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to be back in Houston with so many friends and to have an opportunity to participate in the Planned Parenthood annual meeting. I have to tell you that it was a great privilege when I was told that I would receive this award. I admire Margaret Sanger enormously. Her courage, her tenacity, her vision. Another of my great friends, Ellen Chesler, is here, who wrote a magnificent biography of Margaret Sanger called Woman of Valor. And when I think about what she did all those years ago in Brooklyn, taking on archetypes, taking on attitudes and accusations flowing from all directions, I am really in awe of her. And there are a lot of lessons that we can learn from her life and from the cause she launched and fought for and sacrificed so greatly.
Now, before you all go after me half-cocked about the two videos I showed you, it gives Oprah Winfrey, which I've been talking about forever, about the fact that she's a part of the New Age movement, the New Earth religion, and what they truly believe in. This is why I played that. In her mind, this is what she believes in. This is why she has supported so many certain politicians and things like that, like Obama, forever, because they are a part of that as well. And Hillary Clinton and whatever. In one of the interviews I played a long time ago, they asked her, I guess Bill King or whatever King he is, he asked her why she chose him and not Hillary Clinton. And she said because she believes that Obama could do the most damage. So this, I truly believe it's for other reasons, but that is what I'm played it, why I played the interview, and why I'm telling you now about what's going on and why they're a part of it. And so let's get busy, get with it. Like I said, this is from 1957 ABC.
We go after the story of the woman who violated convention and bucked powerful opposition to lead the birth control movement in America. You see her behind me. She's Mrs. Margaret Sanger, who was thrown into jail 8 different times for her efforts. If you're curious to know why Mrs. Sanger has devoted her life to the birth control movement, if you'd like to hear her answer to the charge that birth control is a sin, and if you want to get her views on politics, divorce, and God, we'll go after those stories in just a moment. My guests' opinions are not necessarily mine. The stations are my sponsors, Philip Morris Incorporated, but whether you agree or disagree, we feel that none should deny the right of these views to be broadcast.
This is what I like about this video is when he jumps on the if we're going to be asking questions tonight, but we ain't got nothing to do with it. The views and opinions, hey, that's not us. We ain't got nothing to do with that. Don't blame us. We're not the ones to come up with it. We're not responsible. Anyway, it's just funny when he says that.
When Mrs. Margaret Sanger opened the first birth control clinic in the United States back in 1916, birth control was a dirty word. The police threw her into jail as they were to do 7 more times during her crusade, a crusade that still faces the reasoning but unalterable opposition of the Roman Catholic Church. That crusade kept Mrs. Sanger away from her children for long periods. It helped to break up her first marriage. and she suffered constant, harrowing social abuse.
And by the way, this comes from the Harry Ransom Center and their information, and it's from the University of Texas in Austin. They hold the archives for this video, plus other things as well.
Mrs. Sanger, in view of all of that, let me ask you this first of all. Why did you do it? I realize that you had an intellectual conviction that birth control was a boon to mankind, but I'm sure that others have that conviction too. And so what I'd like to know is this. What events, what emotions in your life made Margaret Sanger a crusader for birth control?
Well, Mr. Wallace, it's hard to say that any one thing has made one do this or that. I think from the very beginning, I came with a large family. My mother died young, 11 children. It made an impression on me as a child. Mm-hmm. I was a trained nurse, went among the people. I saw women who asked to have some means whereby they wouldn't have to have another pregnancy too early after the last child, the last abortion, which many of them had. So there's a number of things that are one after the other that really made you feel that you had to do something.
There are some other...
Oh, wait a minute. She said after the last abortion, which one already had. So, first of all, I don't want to get into the abortion debate, but it just seems to me, I know it's a difficult thing to do, but it just seems to me if you just don't want to have another child, you just don't have sex at all, especially if you're not married, or, there are other means of stopping it. So, you can kind of cut down the rate of pregnancies if you take other means and take other actions instead of just, I'm just going to do what I want whenever I want to do it, and then I'll just abort it. But regardless, not getting into that argument, but I think this is a stepping stone to the eugenics program, because if you look up the eugenics program and who was involved and who was into this sort of thing, you had people from Woodrow Wilson, Ford, not Gerald Ford, but, Henry Ford. You had, which I found it very surprising, and I'll show you in one of the videos one of these days. Winston Churchill was involved, so on and so forth. The list goes on and on and on. Was interested in what this woman was trying to basically provide or show the world, or try to bring it up. But she is in a crusade to make it sound like it's a good thing. We're trying to help society out. But later on, when you get in this video, you realize what her whole intentions are.
Possible reasons that suggest themselves on reading your biography by Lawrence later. Your mother, as you say, died prematurely after bearing 11 children. She was born a Catholic, was she not?
She was born a Catholic, yes.
And
in Ireland.
Your father was a sort of village atheist who clashed with church authorities, and because of his atheism, his earnings dwindled under community pressure. You and your brothers and sisters were known as, quote, children of the devil,
nervous.
End quote.
Yeah, look how she smiles about that.
Could it be then that in part at least,
she gets upset or kind of nervous when she mentions the Catholic Church, which I don't defend at all. But I find it really interesting. The Catholic Church is a known group of people that hid Nazis after World War II, like, supposedly generals and people that went into hiding and things like that, and possibly Adolf Hitler. And I find it interesting. These are the same people that are involved, the Nazis were involved in the eugenics program and things like that. I find it interesting that the Catholic Church, because it goes around in a circle, we're helping them out, and yet she was against the Catholic Church. So I'm kind of at a loss at this whole thing. So I'm thinking maybe they just didn't understand or didn't know, but it's a whole confusing thing. But I think it's very funny if you look at the video how she started smiling when they, maybe it's just she thought it was funny that they were saying that, but she didn't seem to be like that when they were mentioning the fact her mother was in the Catholic Church.
You were driven emotionally toward the birth control movement because of antagonism toward the church, because that was a way to fight the church?
No, I don't think I had anything of the kind in mind.
Nervous.
I was what I would call a born humanitarian. I don't like to see people suffer. I don't like to see cruelty, even to this day. And in nursing, you see a great deal of cruelty and unnecessary suffering. At that time, there was no opposition as far as the church was concerned, any church. It was mainly the law, the federal law and state laws that one had to think of. The church was not in my mind at all.
Well, in going after your motive, then, and I will press you just a little bit more about that and then get to the specifics of this evening. But in your motive, in the movement, is it possible that the movement itself, the feeling of wanting to do anything that you felt was important, that perhaps that moved you a good deal? Because the fact remains that you led a movement against overwhelming pressures that stemmed back for centuries, and in doing so, according to your autobiography, you even left your first husband. And you wrote this to a friend.
Now, a movement that stood back for centuries. We're talking Madame Blavatsky and so on and so forth. Now, a movement that stood back for centuries. What exactly kind of movement is he referring to?
Mrs. Sanger, you said,
I was that nervous.
"Where is the man to give me what the movement gives in joy and interest and freedom?" Now, what was this joy, this freedom that you craved?
Well, I don't remember that letter it was written, but I think that it was not a question of marriage at all. There was a certain satisfaction in doing something that was going to alleviate the sufferings of women in particular, and I was quite a feminist at the time.
Obviously.
And yes, and I naturally didn't want to see women take all the suffering of childbearing and of pregnancies. So it was a pleasure, in a sense, to think that you were striking at an archaic law, which it was. It was put on the statute books by Anthony Comstock some years ago, and no one had stood up against it. No one had tried to change the laws. And at that time, not even a doctor had a right to use the United States mails and common carriers for books, for learning, for anything that he had to do with this question. It was considered obscene. The whole question was considered obscene.
Mrs. Sanger, you have helped to spread the birth control movement not only here in the United States, but in Europe and the Orient as well. Why?
This is interesting.
Is birth control of such vital importance internationally? Is it just to save women suffering? Is that the only reason in your mind?
Well, not entirely. The population question is a great concern today, and the rate at which the births come in we're saving them now. At one time, the children died. They didn't have the food. Today, our population all over the world is getting certainly better consideration and better conditions than they had at the time that I was there. I went to every country because I was invited. And I didn't go into the country myself. I was invited to go to Japan and to speak there, to have 8 lectures on the question of birth control and peace.
Well, do you believe that birth control is essential if we want to keep millions of people across the world from starving? Is that your thesis?
Say it again.
Do you feel that birth control is essential to keep millions of people across the world from starving?
Well, I think the birth control, if you keep your population more or less static until you pick up your resources, certainly you'll keep them and prevent their starving.
Well, what's more important, birth control or picking up the resources?
Well, picking up the resources, there's just a limit to that, too. There's just so much that Japan. And she cannot feed. They've had the best experts come there when MacArthur was there. The best experts have said they have 20 million more people than they can feed.
Well, that's because it was basically our fault. Well, not entirely, but, the war kind of damaged that with the nuclear weapons when they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima and all the wars that were caused over there in Japan. You would think after burning crops and destroying land and what wars do basically to countries, this is the reason why it caused it. So you can't blame Japan only for the damage done after the war. After all, this is 1957. Second of all, she just brought up the population thing, which is basically what the eugenics program is today. to curb the population because there's too many people and not enough food. That's the idiotic excuse that they use today. But we'll get into the connection with this here in a minute.
She's got to be fed outside in some way. She's got to have that kind of help if she's going to keep from fighting.
But certainly around the world there is potential agricultural land that is not being properly used now. Just this past year, on May 21st, the New York Times summarized an important study of the world's food resources made by Professor James Bonner of the California Institute of Technology. Professor Bonner says the world is not using 1 billion acres of potential agricultural land, and he adds that if this land were used and present agricultural land were improved, the entire world could be fed adequately, even if the population increased by 1/3 in the next 50 years.
That's the exact same thing they say today. Look at her smug look on her face. That's the exact same thing they say today. But you know what Bill Gates is doing? Bill Gates and his little cronies and the United Nations and people of the like in different countries are wanting one world religion, one world government, one world this, one world that, control of everything. But the funny thing is they use this, we don't have enough land to feed people. We don't have, they're sucking up all the resources, which is a bunch of baloney. They are actually buying out all the land. If you look up what Bill Gates and people like that are buying, it's thousands and thousands of acres. China's buying up land. So many people are buying up land for a reason. Why do you think they're buying up so much farmland? Why do you think they're buying up so much resources, supposedly, if we don't have it? Why do you think that is? But this question of, well, there's not enough resources, so we need to curb your population, has been going on for decades, and they're still doing it today. It's kind of like the green movement today, and all that, saying that, well, we're all going to die within a week because the sun's going to burn us to death. And, you know, by the end of this world, by the end of this year, we're going to go through the end of the world because so many catastrophes are going to happen. It's going to kill us all because we're destroying the environment. This has been going on decade after decade after decade after decade. They've been saying at the end of the year, we're all going to die. The same thing here. They keep saying, well, we don't have enough resources, so we need to curb population. 1957, people, this was brought up. Tell me this is not an excuse for doing what they want to do. 1957. What year is it today?
Oh, Mr. Wallace, you hear so many fantastic things, what can happen, what may happen. This and that, I've heard it for the last 30 years at any rate. It could be done, but it's never done. And the thing is, what is it now? What have we got today? A very distinguished woman spoke to me about Arizona. And she said, I wish you wouldn't talk about population. She said, all the population of the United States could be put in one state. And I said, what state? She said, Arizona. I said, did you ever hear of caliche? She didn't know that I was talking about a delicatessen or what. I said, well, caliche is harder than any rock. And it is about 3 inches below the ground, where it looks beautiful. It looks as if you could have food, it looks as if you could have corn or wheat or cotton. But as a matter of fact, you have to dynamite caliche out of the ground in order to have a little shrub, have, you know,
so what's wrong with that?
Grass or a few flowers. So many problems that when it comes to that. And the demographers, I never heard of anyone that would agree with that we could have another in the world. Another third.
Well,
so the entire state of Arizona is the rest of the United States and the country when it comes to land. You can't grow anything because there's not enough resources. So the entire state of Arizona, you can't grow nothing there. Nothing. Can we not figure out how to get dirt, put seeds in dirt and grow things out of dirt? Can we not figure this out? But basically you're saying the entire state of Arizona has rocks and we can't grow anything. How does this woman know this? Are there not any other alternatives? How does she know this? Can she tell the future? Can she tell, is she a farmer? Is she a conservationist? Does she know about the environment? No, she's just a woman that complains because she sees people she don't like, or sees people that's not in a status that she believes other people should be in. So they need to be offed, or we need to get rid of them in society because they're just wasteful.
You say that originally the opposition was in all law, and you have to fight against that. Today, your opposition stems mainly from where? From what source?
Well, I think that the opposition is mainly from the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church.
Of the church. Well, now
Hierarchy.
of the hierarchy of the
the only
church. You
ones.
feel that the parishioners themselves, the lay people in the church, are not against birth control.
I feel they come to all of our clinics just the same as the non-Catholics do. Exactly the same.
Well, let's look at the official Catholic position. Opposition to birth control. I read now from a church publication called The Question Box. In forbidding birth control, it says the following. It says, the immediate purpose and primary end of marriage is the begetting of children. When the marital relation is so used as to render the fulfillment of its purposes impossible, that is by birth control, it is used unethically and unnaturally. Now, what's wrong with that position?
Well, it's very wrong. It's not normal. It's not, it has the wrong attitude toward marriage, toward love, toward the relationships between men and women.
Well, the natural law, they say, is that, first of all, the primary function of sex in marriage is to beget children.
Thank you.
Do you disagree with that?
I disagree with it 100%.
Your feeling is what, then?
My feeling is love and the attraction between men and women. In many cases, the very finest relationship has nothing to do with bearing a child.
Okay, I'll give her that.
It's secondary.
Uh-huh.
Many
In some
times we know
relationships.
that. You see, everybody three.
But first of all, that's not the whole point of it. That's not the whole point of, when you look at actual biblical law, what's in God's mind, or things like that. When you want to argue religion, not arguing the Catholic Church, but when you argue religion and what their beliefs are and what a lot of people's beliefs are today in religion, that's the whole point of marriages and children. The whole basic reason is to grow a family, to start a family. Some people in today's society do not do that. They get married and don't have children. But basically, I'll give her some of that. But all in all, the whole foundation of man and women and marriage and all that stuff is basically to start a family and to have children. As it says, if you want to get into religion, the whole point in the Bible.
Talk to people who have very happy marriages and they're not having babies every year. Yes, I think that's a celibate attitude. Surely.
A celibate attitude, but you agree that Catholicism, according to the tenets of Catholicism, they rule that birth control violates not only the Church's position, it isn't the Church's position, but they say that it violates a natural law, as I have just explained. Therefore, birth control is a sin.
Now, keep in mind, she's the one that started Planned Parenthood. She's the one that caused, thousands and thousands of babies to be unborn today. She's to be killed. She's the main cause of this. And like I said, we're not getting into abortion, all that stuff. That's not the whole purpose. Her purpose of doing this was the eugenics program. Her whole purpose of doing this was racism. She's using this abortion thing and Planned Parenthood as an excuse for this. Now, I've delved into it. I've looked into it and things like that. And I do find it highly ironic and interesting that many of these abortion clinics, Planned Parenthood and the like, are in, especially Planned Parenthood, are in the poorest neighborhoods in the country. You don't see them. It's possible they're there, but I haven't seen any. The ones I have seen were in the poorest neighborhoods in the country. And traveling like I do, I see it in the poorest neighborhoods in the country, especially in the state of Texas. And I've seen them in the poorest neighborhoods outside of the state of Texas. So what would be the reason why you would have these? If you're just going to say that marriage is just, they don't have to have children, you don't have to marry to have children and blah, 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 why does she not have Planned Parenthood in other neighborhoods, such as the highest neighborhoods in Dallas, the highest neighborhoods in LA, the highest neighborhoods in, if a lot of these people do not want to have children and they want abortions, why isn't Planned Parenthood in other neighborhoods? That's the question I have to ask. But like I said, abortions, according to her, is getting into the eugenics question. Funny that he never brings it up in this, but it's been around for eons. Like I said, Woodrow Wilson was a supporter of it. Henry Ford was a supporter of it. Winston Churchill was a supporter of it. They, if you look back in World War II, which was before 1957, Jews wanted to flee to the United States because the Nazis were going to basically destroy them, and they knew this. But as they tried to flee to the United States turned them away, sent them back to their countries. So there was a reason for this, because of support of eugenics program. And you can look that up, and it's there. I've seen documentaries on this recently.
No matter who practices it. Now, the violation of the natural law, according, you certainly can take no issue with the natural law as the hierarchy.
He's going to catch her, by the way.
Catholic Church regards it.
Well, I certainly do take issue with it. And I think it's untrue, and I think it's unnatural.
Well, let me ask you.
Everything bears it out that it's an unnatural attitude.
I think he's going to find it funny because Wallace is going to catch her. He's going to catch her into, he's baiting her basically, using the, this is what he does. He's baiting her into telling people how she really is and what her whole intention is.
Taken. How do they know? I mean, after all, they're celibates. They don't know love. They don't know marriage. They know nothing about bringing up children or any of the marriage problems of life. And yet they speak to people as if they were God.
And it's funny that she says this. Well, a lot of religions do. How do they know? Well, how do you know that plants don't grow in Arizona, lady? How do you know that? How did she know that you can't farm there? How do you know? I mean, there's cows in Arizona. There are places that you can grow food in Arizona. It's not the entire state. But look, how does she know this? If she's claiming that nobody knows the future, how does she know that you can't grow plants if she's not a farmer?
Let me ask you this question. Suppose a healthy, well-to-do couple decide for some reason never to have children, use birth control all their lives. Would you say that your methods are being misused, Mrs. Sanger?
Now, if they were intelligent people and they had some reason for thinking of children as a responsibility, or some disease that they might have that they wouldn't like to pass on to a child, and I think it would be a very unselfish attitude for them to take if there is a disease.
No, I say a healthy, well-to-do couple. A couple that just doesn't want children, and for that reason they use birth control all the way. Do you think that is a misuse of your methods?
I don't think it's a misuse. I think if they're intelligent adults, they must know what they want. They must manage their lives themselves. And certainly there's nothing in birth control than there is in other things that you might deny yourself.
Intelligent people know what they want, but anything outside of that, they're too stupid, and we have to make the decisions for them. Does that make any sense at all? I mean, come on, really? I thought she said that it had to do with the population and the food resources, but what if I thought that was the whole point of it: food resources and population overgrowth. But she don't seem to have a problem with people just making the decision and saying, I don't want children anyway. Well, you have to be the most intelligent people. If they're intelligent enough, that's fine.
I asked you your motives a little while ago at the beginning of the program, your motives in working for birth control as hard as you have for as many years as you have. You reject the principal Catholic argument against birth control as being totally invalid. What do you think is the reason, the motive of the Church in forbidding birth control?
You'd have to ask a Catholic that. I couldn't say what their motive is.
Well, you couldn't say officially.
But she said, but she knew what they were thinking before. But all of a sudden now she don't know their motive.
Their motive is, but you certainly must have an opinion about it, Mrs. Sanger.
Well, I don't have much to do with the hierarchy, and I know that the people that come to our organization and want to have the same methods or whatever it is that one can have to prevent a pregnancy. But those women will say to us, we ask their religion very often, and they say, I am a Catholic, I was raised in the Catholic Church, and my church is wrong on this. This is the one thing. I will never be anything else, but my church is wrong on this one thing. And that is said over and over and over again. So what the motive is,
Well, you won't hazard a guess.
I don't care to. Thank you.
May I ask you why? Now, I know that in private and actually in public discussions, I think, prior to this time, you have been willing to state your understanding of what the motives of the church are, and now you would rather remain silent. May I ask you why?
Well, simply because I don't think that the church has changed in its attitude. Some of the hierarchy have changed their attitude. You can't say the same thing that you might have said a year ago or 2 years ago as to your belief or as to your opinion. And then
have you heard it said that the reason that the church is against birth control is because they want more Catholics?
I've read it.
Do you believe it?
Well, if you read their papers, where they point out Boston, that's what has happened in Boston and Massachusetts. They have simply outbred the Protestants, and they in Boston and Massachusetts they have control. I've read that in their own papers.
I honestly think this whole thing is about, an attack on this particular religion. Of course, not just them, but other religions as well. But I honestly think this is, an attack on religion, because why keep bringing it up if it's not important and if you don't think one way or the other?
Of course, the church's answer, and I read now from a pamphlet published by the Redemptorist Fathers in Missouri, says as follows. It says that point of view about wanting more Catholics is nonsense. Quote, the Catholic Church does not command Catholic husbands and wives to have even one child. The Church considers it more than normally meritorious for them to have no children if they mutually and perpetually give up the use of the marriage right for the love of God.
All right. I don't quote what they do. So I think that the question in my mind is that they do and order their own people to do as they wish. But I object to their having the same rules for people who are not the same religion.
Well, they believe, you see, that it is a natural law, not a Catholic law, but a natural law, and therefore a sin not just for Catholics, but a sin for all peoples. And I think that there are other religious groups, the very, very Orthodox Jews feel the same way about
it's true.
control. Let's look at another argument against birth control, Mrs. Sanger, published in Red Book magazine in March of 1956. It says birth control is a devastating social force which tends to weaken the moral fiber of the community. Immunity from parenthood encourages promiscuity, particularly when unmarried persons can so easily avail themselves of the devices. Do you doubt that?
I doubt it.
You do?
Certainly.
Then let me read from a news story in the Philadelphia Daily News on June 10th, 1942. The story quotes you as urging the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps to give its members, quote, preventive measures against pregnancy, end quote. And you add, quote, abortion and illegitimacy are bound to result if the government doesn't recognize human nature, end quote. In other words, you were not advocating Christian morality, but rather ways for single women to avoid bearing illegitimate children.
Where was this taken from?
Philadelphia Daily News, June 10, 1942, direct quote from Margaret Sanger.
I doubt it. I don't believe I ever made such a remark.
It's coming from you.
Well,
there's proof.
In the same vein, in your autobiography, which you cannot disavow, you wrote the following.
It's funny. It's kind of like Austin Powers. One pump, they said, that's not mine. One picture of you with the pump, that's not mine. One recording saying that you it's yours. He's basically doing the same thing to her. But in your autobiography, which you wrote,
about sexologist Havelock Ellis, you said he's been able to clarify the question of sex and free it from the smudginess connected with it from the beginning of Christianity. Now, what do you mean by the smudginess connected with sex, and why do you blame it on Christianity?
Well, there's many reasons, of course, to say that we have more records of it from the dawn of Christianity. And I think I was speaking of Havelock Ellis as having clarified the question of homosexuals, making the thing not exactly a perverted thing, but a thing that a person is born with, different kinds of eyes, different kinds of structure, and so forth. That he didn't make all homosexuals perverts. I felt that he helped clarify that to the medical profession and to the scientists of the world, as perhaps one of the first ones to do that.
Did you just say that? Did you just say what I thought you said? Perverts.
That's one of the things I meant in that.
Mrs. Sanger, do you disagree that Catholics, or do you feel that Catholics should not have a right to have a say when a city administration contemplates spending their tax dollars on birth control or the dissemination of birth control information, something that Catholics believe is sinful?
If they have a right to say what they...
Do you feel that they don't have a right to have a say when a city administration contemplates spending their tax dollars on birth control? For instance, here in New York, Catholics comprise about 45% of our population. They're the largest single group. Well, don't you think they should have the democratic right to lobby against having their money spent, their tax money spent, for something that they consider evil?
I suppose they have a right. They certainly do it. But so have the others. They're only 45% of the population. That is not the majority.
See how that
But they
upsets
have
her?
a right to get up and...
Certainly. I'd have no objection to their having them say that, but I think we should have the same right.
See?
I say we, I mean non-Catholics.
Think she has an upset
Well,
about that.
of course, this is a little bit at variance with something that you told our reporter earlier this week. You said earlier this week, it's not only wrong, it should be made illegal for any religious group to prohibit dissemination of birth control, even among its own members. In other words, you would like to see the government legislate religious beliefs in a certain sense.
Where these strange things come to, that I said them, is what I should like to know when.
Well, now, you know that my reporter spent a good deal of time with you. He's
You told them.
very accurate young man.
Yes.
And this
so
is
am
a
I.
this is a specific quote.
Well, I don't think I said it quite that way.
What are your religious beliefs, Mrs. Sanger? Do you believe in a God in the sense of a
Now she's
divine
denying
being who rewards or punishes people after death?
Well, I have a different attitude about
I bet you do.
The divine. I feel that we have divinity within us.
There it is. Right there. That is the new age, the new earth quote that they use on a constant basis. Divine within us. They believe that they're gods. We're all gods. He's a god. She's a god. This glasses are a god. This bottle of water's a god. This computer's a god. That Hot Wheels up there is a god. That's what they believe. And this is exactly what she's saying. Now, I'm going to play it again. This is exactly what she's saying that they use today in the New Earth religion and New Age movement.
Right that way.
What are your religious beliefs, Mrs. Sanger? Do you believe in a God in the sense of a divine being who rewards or punishes people after death?
Well, I have a different attitude about the divine. I feel that we have divinity within us. And the more we express the good part of our lives, the more the divine within us expresses itself. I suppose I would call myself an Episcopalian by religion. And there's many other. If you've traveled around the world, you get quite a bit of the feeling of all religions have so much alike in the divine part of our own being. And I suppose you just couldn't put that in a book, or you couldn't put it into a phrase or a sentence.
Do you believe in sin? When I say believe, I don't mean believe in committing sin. Do you believe there is such a thing as sin?
I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have no chance in the world to be a human being, practically. Delinquents, prisoners, all sorts of things just marked when they're born. That, to me, is the greatest sin.
There it is. There it is. She just outright said it. Marked when they were born. How does she know this? How does she know that I've seen successful people come out of the worst families and the poorest neighborhoods. I've seen unsuccessful people as well. I've heard about, I haven't seen personally, but I've heard about serial killers that come out of the most, look at Jeffrey Dahmer. His parents weren't criminals. His parents raised him a certain way. There was nothing wrong with the family that he grown up with. There was something wrong with him and nobody spotted it. How does she know this when a child is born? How do they know they're marked? Disease? Come on, really? Does that not sound racist to you? Does that not sound? Her whole intention for abortion, her whole intention for eugenics, the whole intention. Let's go again.
Couldn't put it into a phrase or a sentence.
Do you believe in sin? When I say believe, I don't mean to believe in committing sin. Do you believe there is such a thing as sin?
Well, I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have no chance in the world to be a human being, practically. Delinquents, prisoners, all sorts of things just marked when they're born. That, to me, is the greatest sin that people can commit.
But sin in the ordinary sense that we regard it, do you believe or do you not believe?
Well, what would they be?
Do you believe that infidelity is a sin?
Well, I'm not going to specify what I think is sin. I've stated what I think is the worst sin. The greatest sin.
But then you asked me to say what, and I said what, and you refused to answer me?
Yes, I don't know about infidelity. It has so many personalities to it, and what person's own belief is. You can't. I couldn't generalize on any of those things as being sin.
Murder is a sin.
Well, that's naturally thing. Murder is a sin or not. It's a terrible act.
In just a moment, Mrs. Sanger,
Wow.
I'd like to ask you about another social problem here in the United States, divorce. Nearly 400,000 couples get divorced in this country each year. And I'd like to get your views on the cause and possible prevention of this problem. We'll get Mrs. Sanger's answer to that question in just 60 seconds.
You know, I had to edit out a lot of the, there's commercials about, hey, buy this cigarette. It's the greatest thing, and so I had to edit a lot of this out. So I guess I didn't edit
One
this
look
part
at this
out.
cabin cruiser, and you'd know it's new.
Anyway,
Philip Morris, too, and the tobacco itself. And the
cigarettes.
box. Here's
They're
something else
great.
smokers like.
In
It's
1957.
practical, crush-proof. A man's kind of mildness.
Man's kind
a
of
crush-proof
mild
box.
cigarette.
Get with Philip Morris. Probably
What's
the
its
best
Marlboro
natural
today?
smoke you ever tasted.
Hey, I like cancer.
Get with Philip Morris in regular pack or crush-proof box, probably the best natural smoke you ever tasted. Now then, Mrs. Sanger, there are nearly 400,000 divorces or annulments
There
in
goes the
America
nerves
each year.
again.
What, and this is hard to do in the short time, of course, that we have, what would you recommend to cut down our divorce rate?
Well, as a great many of our clinics are including in the work that they do in birth control clinics, having marriage counseling. So when the woman or the man come and complain of their marriage on the skids, we invite them to come and have special talks
With
with
who?
some of our psychiatrists or others who are making a study of that all over the country.
I don't know what that's
where
got
we
to
have
do
about
with
500 clinics.
eugenics,
They almost
but-
all include
or birth control.
marriage counseling and marriage erection.
May I ask you this?
Why?
Could it be that women in the United States have become too independent, that they've followed the lead of women like Margaret Sanger by neglecting family life for a career? Let me quote from your biography describing your second marriage to Noah Slee. Quote, in New York, Mrs. Sanger maintained every clause of their compact of independence. They had separate apartments, they telephoned each other for dinner or theater engagements, or passed notes back and forth. Would you call this a sound formula for marriage,
Really?
Mrs. Sanger?
Different people, yes. It certainly was for me and for my husband. We had a very happy marriage consulting. He had different friends than I had. And I don't believe in forcing, after all, we were two adults. And forcing your friends on another
matter
person
of-
who may have an entirely different outlook. It worked out
It was
very
a
well.
matter of
I know that it did. You have two sons.
It's a
One
matter
final
of,
question. You
parents.
have two sons. How many children have they?
Would you like to see them?
I would indeed.
As well as
How many children? That's 6 in this family?
5 boys and a girl in that family.
And in the other family?
2 girls.
See, this is okay. That's enough of that. It's over. Let's see. Stop share. This is what bothers me about this thing is the fact that she has all these kids, and yet she can make a decision on whether somebody should have children or not, marked when they were born. Now, this is exactly what Adolf Hitler did. This is exactly what the eugenics program does. This is exactly what they believe in. Anyone that has blindness, any deformity, any disability or the fact that they might be criminals or they might be delinquents or they might be have diseases in the future? How do you know anyone's going to have cancer in the future? How do you know anyone's going to have, like today's AIDS or any kind of other deformity or disease or anything like that? How do you going to know? How do you know that this is going? What if somebody has to have an amputation? Do you put them down? What if somebody later on decides to wake up one day after not having a criminal record and say, you know what, I'm going to break the law today? I don't know if that's ever happened or not, but, if somebody gets a traffic ticket for going 5-10 miles over the speed limit, do you get rid of them? Or do you abort their children? Who has the right to make this decision? Who has the right to do this? Apparently, with the eugenics program, this new government they want to establish, where it comes to eliminating the population because there's not enough resources or food. I thought that was the whole purpose of this video. I thought the whole purpose in the beginning, throughout the entire video, was, well, we have to because there's not enough resources, or we have to because there's not enough food, or we have to take care of this problem because there's just too many people in Japan and not enough food to eat, or the pollution, or some other reason we have to do this. But in the end, she basically says, no, it's because they're marked when they're born, diseases, juveniles, and things like that. And I think that's the greatest sin in the world, is to have children. Really? How do you know that's going to happen? Maybe in genetics, there are people that, some people have certain issues and they have children and they have the same issues. I've had a relationship with someone for years that had epilepsy. So, during World War II, and the Nazis were eliminating people that had epilepsy. How do you know that her child is going to have the same issue? How do you know that anyone's child that has epilepsy is going to have the same issue? So we're supposed to eliminate them. Because why? Because they're not the perfect Aryan person. That's why. They're not the perfect Aryan race. Exactly what they've been doing for decades. So think about that. We go from, we need the resources, to delinquents and diseases. That's why it's the greatest sin in the world is to have children. Really? Think about that. That sounds a little shady to me. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I know this is a long video. I'll have more in the future. Hopefully, I can do more videos. And I appreciate everybody watching. Don't forget to share and tell everybody about it. I have gone after this woman for a long time, and everybody's argued with me and everything else. But you decide. Watch the video yourself. It's on YouTube. And, give the credit to ABC and Harry Ransom, the collection, and all that. And Mike Wallace. But look into this video yourself. Look into this woman. Do your research. You'll find some interesting things on these people that you've never thought possible. And like I said, even today, like Oprah Winfrey, they all have to die, right? Think about that. And until next time, see ya.